Hello and welcome to UPSC Preparation Simplified, an initiative by RAU'S IAS Study Circle, where we try to actually focus on the kind of problems that you might face while preparing for the UPSC examination. Now you must be aware of the fact that recently UPSC has concluded the UPSC mains examination, and now it is time for you who are preparing for the next attempt to know all about what was the nature of the paper, what was the trend like, and what you can do in the coming attempt so that you get extra marks for preparing. Now in this context, we have Mr. Anubhav Sharma, who is a teacher with RAU'S IAS, and he has years of experience in guiding thousands of people in terms of polity and governance, and he's also an optional teacher at RAU'S IAS of public administration. So he will be sharing his wisdom about what the interpretation of this particular person was about the polity and governance aspect, and what he has in terms of suggestion for you in order to prepare better. So sir, welcome on board.
My pleasure, sir.
So sir, the paper is now done, the verdict is out, and I would like to hear from your side, what is the verdict from your side? What was the trend of the paper, the nature, and were there any surprises or not about the polity and governance in this aspect? Can you please throw some light?
Well, so broadly, when we look at the paper, we see it to be pretty much in line with what UPSC has been doing. Of course, there will be some surprises, that is expected. But then broadly, when we look at the way in which we had gone about in terms of covering it, many of the things were absolutely in line with the trends that we have been seeing, sir.
Okay.
So I think my opinion was a pretty balanced paper, pretty standard UPSC kind of a paper, sir.
Okay, sir. Now, whenever we talk about the UPSC paper, I have been going through the paper the last few years, and we have seen that UPSC started pay attention on some specific terms. So they have talked about cooperative federalism in the past. Similarly, there was a question on constitutional morality this year.
Exactly.
So can you help us identify what UPSC is trying to test through this?
So essentially, when we look at the trend of the paper, one of the things which UPSC is trying to do is to create a separate space for the mains part, so that they are able to do the subjective analysis of your understanding. In this respect, one of the things, as you very correctly pointed out, so there has been a question on cooperative federalism, there has been a question with respect to constitutionalism in the past, and this year they went for constitutional morality. And that too, they essentially linked it with the landmark judgments that we see in recent time, which Supreme Court has been using. So one thing which is absolutely clear is that one of the emphasis of UPSC now is to test the aspirant's ability to kind of comprehend what exactly is happening with respect to moral aspect of it. And then the best way to understand, in my opinion, is to keep a track of your Supreme Court judgments, sir.
Okay.
Because that, I guess, is where the questions are coming from if you look at analyze the trends of past few years, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, whenever we focus our attention on the polity,
Yes,
we have seen one very interesting aspect, that it deals with topics which are on the border area of social justice, and also to an extent in the economy as well. Even this year there were some questions.
Yes.
So can we take some example of the question from the paper and discuss why UPSC is doing it?
Sure, sir. So see, when we look at UPSC paper 2, and in fact for that matter even GS 1, 2, 3, 4, this is something which is now very evident, that the whole idea is that it's not just about your understanding for polity or governance or social justice. It is a kind of integrated understanding, and how well you're able to link the understanding that you have for the different subjects for the preparation you have done. For instance, there was a question with respect to, what we see is the fact that a lot of women who should get representation in higher judiciary, but that is not as happening, and what exactly is going to be the impact on the society in this regard. Now, if you think about it, this is coming from NJAC, the issue with respect to NJAC, collegiate system, the criticism around it, what they have done is to link it with the issues linked to women. That is why exactly women representation is important. So I think one of the things which is very necessary, that we have to keep a track of newspaper. We need to do a proper understanding of articles, because a lot of times the current affairs, the way in which newspaper articles are written, are actually trying to focus on that. Apart from it, there was again a question on primary healthcare, which essentially is around current development with respect to the improper healthcare facilities that we see with respect to healthcare. That again is somewhere in between what we see in social justice, and then overlapping with some of the aspects of the governance part of it. So I think one of the takeaway in this regard, based on the trends that we see, is the fact that you cannot take subjects for granted and say that there will be a strict question that will be coming only from governance, or a question that will be coming from social justice. You need to develop your answer writing skills where you're able to integrate it. And this is one of the things that we are focusing also in our answer writing programs, in the sessions that we are having with students, sir.
Actually, the core is to be interdisciplinary in approach.
We have to.
We need to work on that.
That is the demand of the exam now, sir.
Okay. Now, there is one very interesting question, especially from the perspective of governance. It talks about the role of CBI and filing of FIR, and then its impact on the federal nature. So these are the questions which appear to be a little static, but their roots are derived from the things that are happening around us. So, what is the way, how to bridge this gap from being static to something which is very dynamic?
Sir, I think one of the things which is very clear is that this question is not just about statutory institutions which we have to study as a part of a polity, but it is also talking about federalism, because law and order is a subject that is in the state list.
State list.
In this regard, what has happened is they have actually asked a question with respect to something which is happening, which we are seeing. We saw it in West Bengal, we are actually seeing it in Maharashtra, that there's always this dispute between the state and the center. In this regard, I think one of the very important aspects which I actually found in my experience that a lot of students missed out was doctrine of continuous mandamus. That is how even Supreme Court is utilizing CBI as an agency in order to conduct its impartial inquiry, like for what we see in Pegasus. So in some ways, I believe that one of the things that we need to take away from here is the fact that the questions will be there with your starting understanding about statutory organization. This time it was CBI, it can be CVC in the next exam, it can be, let's say, National Human Rights Commission in the next exam. But the whole idea is that how well we are able to integrate it with the current affairs, again, is going to be at the heart of it. So, again, as I said, newspaper reading along with our understanding of Focus magazine, along with ensuring that our answer writing is looking into that aspect, we are working on that, is going to be the key, sir.
Now, you have mentioned the term, it actually captured my attention as well.
Sir.
Doctrine of continuous mandamus. Can you explain a little more what it is?
Sure, sir. So essentially what we have is Article 32 and Article 226. These are articles which essentially gives writ power to our judiciary. So Article 32 talks about writ power of Supreme Court, and we have writ power of judiciary, that is High Court, in Article 226. One of the writ is mandamus. What essentially happens in mandamus is the fact that Supreme Court, in order to ensure that a public office is delivering its duty, issues this writ in order to direct for the action to be taken. So it could be that FIR is not getting registered, so it can ask the officer in charge that you need to you need to register this FIR. Now what happens is, sir, when in continuous mandamus, essentially Supreme Court takes control of the executive wing. For example, in Pegasus, we see Supreme Court has said that CBI will be functioning under us, will be reporting under us till the time investigation with respect to Pegasus is over.
Okay.
Now the point is, it is happening on continuous basis. On continuous basis, they are actually sending the report to Supreme Court. As such, what we are saying, it's a doctrine of continuous mandamus.
Okay.
Because the writ is in continuity. So the idea is that this is something which is very central to this answer, and a lot of students, at least in my experience, what I'm seeing, have missed out on it. Something that we had stressed when we were covering statutory bodies in our polity lessons, that this is very important for us to understand. So yes, sir. So that is doctrine of continuous mandamus.
Now, when we were looking at the questions, there was one question on pressure groups as well.
Yes, sir.
And actually, it is very difficult for me to fit this pressure group as part of some syllabus topic as well.
Yes,
so, what is the reason of taking out this topic and where it will actually fit in terms of syllabus as well?
So, when we look at the syllabus of paper 2, that is GS2, when we look at it, we see that several aspects are being borrowed from polity, of course, and then they have included aspects with respect to governance. And if we see, like somewhere below the syllabus, they have actually covered some of the topics like pressure groups. They have covered topic with respect to civil society, topic with respect to role of civil services. So, one of the trends that again is pretty visible is one of these topics are always getting taken up. So this year they have gone for pressure groups. Year before they had actually gone for civil society. There's every chance they might actually go for role of civil services. This again actually forms one of the bases in which we prioritize what exactly are going to be the topics that are going to be important, so that we are always ahead of UPSC in terms of the trends that is happening, sir. But then this is very much expected, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, one more question which came in this year's paper was dealing with the comparison of constitutions as well. And that is something which actually bothers us, bothers, aspirants in terms of what all constitution should we go through and what is the reason of asking this thing. So can you throw some light on that as well in terms of the purpose and how to define the resources as well in this aspect?
True, sir. So Essentially, sir, when we go back, let's say 5-6 years back, so one of the things that used to be a kind of very important part of polity preparation used to be what exactly are the features that we have borrowed from other constitutions and brought it to India. But I think somewhere UPSC has understood like this is something which is now old. We need to update ourselves, and one of the ways in which they're moving towards is not only we need to understand what exactly the provisions that we have borrowed, we also would need to understand how exactly the provisions that we have and similar provisions that other constitutions have, how exactly are they working. For example, this year itself there was a question with respect to how exactly right to equality manifest in US Constitution as compared to Indian Constitution. It requires us to explain the social justice part of how exactly we look at right to equality, how exactly Article 14, 15, 16 is essentially trying to bring social justice to the deprived sections. It can also include the aspect with respect to economic weaker section that we saw actually became a part of legitimate reasonable classification to whom we can actually give affirmative action. But then when we look at US Constitution, it essentially is more about the discrimination that happens with respect to race. What I'm trying to say is the last to last year we saw question being asked on secularism. What exactly is India's brand of secularism? How exactly is different from the world? Again, the idea is that secularism is not something which is unique only to Indian Constitution, but then the way in which it manifests, it essentially is different from US, it is different from France. Idea is, do you understand it? That is what UPSC is saying to the aspirant, that do you understand how exactly our secularism is different, how exactly our equality before law is different, how exactly our equal protection of law is different. And in this regard, what becomes important is not only we understand the text of the constitution, that is text of Lakshmikant, text of all the standard books we follow, but we also need to understand the essence of it. And that requires deeper understanding, analysis, and of course a lot of practice, sir.
Now, when we look into this paper, it is polity, it has governance, and it has static, it has dynamic. So what are the resources that one should use in order to actually prepare for this examination effectively, especially for the mains perspective?
Right, so one of the things which I'm absolutely convinced about is there is no escaping NCRTs. A lot of time I see aspirants talk to me and they say, should we go for NCRT and all? I always say you should be. For the reason NCRTs are those books which acts as the standard books from where you're supposed to start. Now, will NCRTs in itself will be sufficient? Of course not. You need to study NCRTs. You need to study your standard books like Lakshmikant or D.D. Basu, whichever you feel comfortable. And above that, we need to focus on newspaper reading. Apart from it, what is also required is that you're able to understand and pick the right news, and you're able to link it with what exactly can be asked in the exam. This is again where we, like at RAU'S, what we're trying to do is to keep on updating our DNS. Right, sir? The idea is that how exactly we can demystify newspaper reading. So I guess these are some of the basic that needs to be done. Getting your NCRTs right, getting your standard books right, that is your Lakshmikant, D.D. Basu, whichever you like, and getting your newspaper reading right along with your monthly magazine. If you're getting these right, then you do your MCQ practice for your prelims, and of course your answer writing practices must for means, then you are reasonably on track with respect to this exam, sir.
Okay,
that is my take on it.
So this is something which actually will help them to refine their resources as well, because otherwise people just keep on adding in resources. I have seen students going for PIB, for Yojana, for Kurukshetra and what else. So, and still not doing enough in their own scope. So I think this advice must be helping them a lot.
So to add on it, so essentially if you look at the trend of UPSC, essentially what they are focusing now is more on your understanding. So, increasing your resources may not help you as much as increasing your depth of understanding of your limited resources. And I think this is something which now aspirants will need to realize. Instead of going after all sorts of resources, that I don't think is going to help as much as understanding what is required and the manner in which you're supposed to study it.
Okay. Now, there is one thing that we talk about now is that when you look into this topic, the polity and governance aspect, this is dynamic, this is huge, and there are so many small dimensions. So how do we teach at RAU'S IAS in terms of the students who come to us? Some of them are exposed, many of them are not exposed. So how do we help them to develop that kind of clarity, conceptual clarity, so that they can ace the examination?
I understand, sir, and this is a question that we continuously deliberate on in order to make us better. So one of the keystone things that we do is that we always presume all the students who are entering a foundation batch, we presume that they are starting from zero. So the whole idea is that we are trying to make things which may appear uncomplicated to them, how to make it uncomplicated, how to make it simple. And we start from basics, we start from zero, we make them understand the most basic terms. For example, in polity, I make sure they understand the meaning of democracy, liberty, equality, some of the words that we take for granted. That is one part of it that we do. Apart from it, the whole purpose of RAU'S IAS is to make you exam ready. and that cannot happen if you are not giving proper input with respect to current affairs. In this regard, we have a very dedicated team which essentially is working on daily basis, on monthly basis, in order to keep on creating that very relevant data. Apart from it, we also empathize with students in the sense that we understand there's only so much they can do. It is going to take some time. It is a process, and we want to emphasize on that process. In this regard, what we are also doing is to make this product called GSI QIP. Essentially, what we do is not just we will make sure that in your foundational course your basics are getting right. You're absolutely able to understand all the important concepts and you're able to link it with newspaper. But we provide this QIP essentially to make sure that you're exam ready.
Yes.
So it serves the purpose of your revision. It serves the purpose of you getting your concepts right. It is also, the whole process includes MCQ practice, the whole process includes model answers discussion. That in itself is a way in which we are able to make them exam ready. So this is something that we absolutely emphasize on, that a student who enters our institute and the time when he leaves an institute, he is absolutely exam ready and to clear this examination, sir.
I think that actually solves the problem for most of the aspirants, because it is not only about resources, it is all about how you utilize the resources.
True, sir.
And the kind of plan you give to yourself and the kind of execution that is basically done to implement that.
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing all this wisdom. I hope that now students have more clarity about how to handle polity and governance, which is actually a vast topic. There's so many questions. You cannot leave this topic like at the mercy of God. You need to have a very systematic and organized approach to handle that. And I think today you have given them enough inputs to organize that. So all those people who are on the other side of the screen, I think now you have an absolute clarity about how the paper was in terms of UPSC Mains 2021 from the perspective of polity and governance. This was Mr. Anubhav Sharma, and this was his wisdom, which will pave the success path for you in the time to come, provided you implement what he has just told you. Okay, so this is something which is important. Apart from that, testing is also very important. Knowledge gathering is one, but once you start testing yourself, you identify your knowledge gaps, and this basically helps you in terms of refining your approach for various topics. So read, write, practice, and then fill gaps. This is very important. Okay, so you should actually stay tuned for more content like this. We are continuously in the process of bringing all this analysis so that you have complete understanding how the paper was. So you should stay tuned and keep following us. We will be bringing more knowledge and information from the perspective of mains examination. From the entire team of RAU'S IAS, we wish you all the very best. Take very good care.